Hello, Wild Nettle family and audience on this platform. I come to you finally with my first video to share my journey of creating this baby as the founding mama of Wild Nettle, and really to share a little bit about my story for those who don't know and who wish to see a little bit behind the curtains of what prompted me to bring these weeds to life and to really give them a stage as I see them as such important allies and superheroes, superpowers for our times. So yes, I'm Annette. I never in a million years would have thought I would start a herbal brand, although now that I trace my roots and really connect to my ancestry, I see a lot of herbalists and witches and women who were farmers in South Africa deeply connected to the soil. So in a way, it makes sense. I grew up in Cape Town. My father is a doctor, and if you've come to my workshops, you will know that I often speak of the differences of the different traditions. So my father being in the scientific Western medical tradition, as well as my journey into yoga, the heroic tradition, and then ultimately landing in the wise woman tradition, which really feels like home and wholeness and holiness, and the encompassing of everything, all of life, and really listening to grandmother's wisdom. So how did I get to this place? It certainly didn't start off this wise and simple. I lived in London studying, partying. I lived a very wild life, doing all the naughty things, really harsh on my body, really self-destructive, starving myself. I had anorexia for many years, silent anorexia that nobody would have known, but inside I was always denying myself and punishing myself by over-exercising. I then became a vegan, which was another way to put a shield from eating delicious buttery foods and cakes and meats. And I realized that I was so far away from nature. I was so disconnected from my body. And my body eventually sent signals after signals to try to wake me up, but I wouldn't listen until it reached a point when I was around 21 where I couldn't digest my food. I had eczema everywhere. I was constantly bloated. I actually got herpes, which was a big part of awakening for me to the shame of my relationship to sex. Just a whole host of Epstein-Barr viruses, and basically an immune system shutdown. And bless my body, I'm so grateful it happened, because it started my journey of firstly cutting out all the drugs, both recreational and antibiotic, pharmaceutical, just throwing away all the pills and beginning to really develop a listening, quiet relationship to my body and what was actually being called for. I went and quit my university decision to be a lawyer. I left London. I told my parents I don't want to follow this trajectory anymore, much to their despair and still sometimes despair. And I decided to go on a soul-searching mission, because clearly something was very sick. There was a dis-ease in my system. And I'm glad I had the privilege to do that, because it led me to the most magical of places and people. My first introduction to wise women who were holding circles and moon lodges, and I found mentors who understood what it meant to love your body and nourish your body. And before I got to this place, I have to say that I did go through a process of elimination, cleansing, detoxing, feeling like I was such a dirty, bad model club girl who'd been taking so much alcohol and drugs. And I did go through this big detox process, which I found eventually to be more destructive on my system because it kept me in this place of shame and guilt. And so when I ended up at Standing Rock, which I'm going to write a blog post about, supporting Indigenous elders, building teepees, sweat lodge, I was told to work in the kitchens, and there was buffalo being served. And at this point I was still a vegan and still quite self-righteous in my healthy, super healthy life. And I had one of the chiefs just really humble me and serve me some humble pie of buffalo and butter and tell me to understand the importance of their relationship to animal and the sacredness of what it meant to eat meat. And so that was one of the big wake-up calls, this disconnect from the reciprocity of life and death. And that is the wise woman way, and I'll get more into it, but I want to keep on track with how I got to the weeds. So from my time in North Dakota, I then ended up in New York, which the hooting is a perfect soundtrack for my time in New York, loud and busy and chaotic. And I ended up in an old bookshop and read a book by Susan Weed, who really became a mentor for me. The baddest, scariest witch bitch in the world. Many do not understand this woman's wisdom, but I absolutely respect her for her power, for her tenacity, and for her deep, deep commitment to women and to returning ancient remedies. And so I followed my intuition and I went to Susan Weed's farm in upstate New York and apprenticed with her and really began this unraveling process of all the bullshit and health fads that I had attached myself to, particularly around raw food and cleansing and this desire to be this healthy, overly precious human, and got my hands in the soil and literally in the compost and the poop and returned to the realest of the real, which is wild weeds, nourishing meals, animals, goat milk, fat, protein, blood, just the basics and the simplicity of really what it means to be a human being in reciprocity and connection with all of life and all of nature. I was suffering from chronic adrenal fatigue at this point, still trying to retain my energy after working in nightclubs, literally 4 times a week. And when I was not working in the clubs, I was partying. So my system was absolutely in need of repair. I also had lost my period for 2 years, and drinking nourishing infusions, herbal, wild infusions for years is ultimately what returned me to health, to the glowing, nourishing, high energy being that I am today. And of course, there were many other practices and rituals that I committed to, but the weeds were really the foundation because it was a replenishing of the minerals that I had lost through these years of not only stress and anxiety, but also bad eating habits, bad drinking habits, and bad vibrations, really, places, leaking energy. And I feel like the weeds came into my body and my cells and literally rewired my system to learn how to be resilient, because weeds are badass, they are resilient. They've been around much longer than any other plants. And they taught me how to trust my body's instincts, the wild woman inside of me, to know what I actually yearned for, what I wanted to eat, what I desired, what I hungered for. and to begin this process of nourishment, and nourishment over the punishment of the old paradigm that I had subscribed to, because in some deep part of my white colonial self there was a lot of guilt, there was a lot of shame, there was so much disconnect from my roots, and so I attached to other people's ideas instead of really listening to the ancient witch inside of me who knew how to heal herself. And that's what the weeds provided. And yeah, I then decided in lockdown, holy majoli, the world is really lost. And we are still so in fear of our own immune systems and health. And the fact that we thought we needed to hide from a virus was just the epitome of the disconnect and fear of nature, because viruses are part of nature. And if we don't build our own immune system to be part of that nature, we will continue to live isolated in boxes. And that certainly is not the world I want my children to grow up in. And so I took it upon myself to start sharing the weeds and the nourishment that they provide and the health that they build from the base, from your minerals, from your vitamins. As you know, the soil is depleted. The groceries we buy are stripped of bacteria, of connection to soil, because they're sprayed with pesticides. They've been genetically modified. They are dead inside a lot of the time. And so by consuming wild plants, you really get to intake minerals that have not been messed with. You get to taste the wildness again, and your body can then repair itself and remember what it means to be a well mineralized, vitaminized being. And the systems then start to repair: hormonal system, nervous system, adrenals. So much of my work in supporting women through trauma, through deep emotions, through uplifting their lives and following their dreams is getting their bodies on board first and foremost. And so if we can provide not only our bodies with the minerals they need, but also the soil. So the bigger mission of Wild Nettle is, with every person that buys these weeds and returns minerals to their bodies, we are also in a process of returning weeds to agriculture, making it normal to have weeds in gardens, because weeds also bring fertility to soil. And our livelihood depends on well-nourished and fertile soil. And so I just see the weeds as the superheroes, and I'm just so grateful that I get to put these babies on a stage. It was very conflicting and difficult for me to do this, and you can check my behind-the-scenes stories to know the journey of fearing commercializing this product. But like Kiana, my fellow employee, told me, she's like, the weeds are so grateful and they thank you. And I actually started crying, because I realized that I've spent so much time drawing pictures of the weeds, that's the mullein goddess, really illustrating and bringing these beauties to life, because for so long they've been neglected and pulled out and literally poisoned with pesticides, because they've been seen as useless, when in fact they are one of the most, if not the most richest sources of healing and health and medicine. And so yes, that's a little bit of my story. There's a lot more to it, and I will share the different processes and more about why I'm here. But I just want you to know that, yeah, I do this for the weeds, and I do this for humans' bodies and the soil body, and the deep yearning to rewild and remember grandmother's wise tradition of nourishing our bodies, forgiving ourselves, returning to something that is simple and accessible and should be really spread throughout the world. So yes, we've got big dreams. We're only in the beginning process of this brand, this baby. And yeah, I just am excited to share this wisdom with you and hope to meet you.